Hey everybody, welcome to Always Bored Never Boring. Every now and again somebody will ask me if I would do a top X list of my favourite board games. It's something I have considered, but for me it's quite difficult. I think a lot of people who follow my channel may think I'm all about miniatures gaming. There was a while a few years back when some people referred to my channel as a Games Workshop channel because they thought that was all I covered. But the truth is, what I do on my channel doesn't even scratch the surface. I tend to focus on miniatures gaming because when I deviate too far from that, everybody stops watching. I love all forms of gaming and I am omnivorous in my tastes. I will just as happily play a tabletop miniatures game as I would an abstract strategy game, an epic cooperative dungeon crawler, or a 5-minute card game. And because my tastes are so varied, it's difficult to put my favourite games into any kind of order. It's difficult to compare Horrified to Hero Quest because they are very different games doing very different things that I want to play at very different times. But I've given it a go, and over the next 5 videos I'm going to briefly run down my top 50 games. I think the list might surprise some people. There is far less Games Workshop on here than people might expect, but I hope it proves interesting. Maybe it will shed some light on a few games you haven't heard of, and while I will only be discussing each title incredibly briefly, I can also do follow-up videos on anything that people would like to know more about, or just field questions in the comments section. Finally, before we start, the rules. I'm a gamer, of course there are rules. They're very straightforward. 1. I can pick any type of game. Abstracts, miniature games, role-playing games, card games, whatever. 2. The games have to be in my collection right now. 3. I reserve the right to completely change my mind tomorrow. As I said, ordering these games is difficult for me because they are so varied and distinct. Additionally, games do go in and out of favour with me. Sometimes I won't play a game I love for years. Right, I think that covers it. So, number 50, Avalon. Avalon is a fun party game in the style of Werewolves of Miller's Hollow, but which doesn't need such a large group to play. All of the players are Knights of the Round Table, although some are secretly allocated the role of traitor. In each round, one player becomes the leader and selects a team to go on a quest, then everybody votes on whether they accept the team or not. If the team is rejected, everybody tries to figure out why people voted the way they did, and then a new leader forms a new team. If the team is accepted, everybody in the team secretly selects to pass or fail the mission. Loyal knights have to pass, traitors can choose to pass or fail. If at least one fail turns up, the quest fails. If 3 out of 5 quests are failed, the traitors win. It's a really fun social deduction game, and there are a few twists, like one player is Merlin who knows who the traitors are, but if the traitors figure out who Merlin is, they can assassinate him and win the game that way instead. There are also lots of extra special characters that add little twists to the rules if you choose to use them. If you had asked me a few years ago, this game probably would have been much higher on the list, but over time it has started to slide off the scale. I tend to only play it once a year at Christmas now, and the last few times we have played, the experience was a little off. One was down to a Merlin player misinterpreting who was a traitor and who was loyal, while another was down to someone who kept making such bizarre choices they appeared like a traitor when they were loyal. This didn't ruin the game, it actually made the game amusing in a different sort of way, but it highlights that this is a game that is made or broken by the people playing it. If people don't get into the discussions that help to out the traitors, or they don't understand something, or they get upset if they start being accused when they're innocent, or hundreds of other reasons, the game can really go off the rails. I still like it a lot, but this one is barely hanging on in the top 50, and I doubt it will be there this time next year. Number 49, Snake Oil. Snake Oil is one of my favourite party games. I don't like things like Cards Against Humanity, which I consider to be a bit mindless and full of shocking content for the sake of being shocking. Snake Oil is similar in some aspects to Cards Against Humanity, but it gives you something to do. You have a real opportunity to be creative. The idea is one player will be a customer and the rest of the players are salespeople. They have a selection of word cards in their hands and they have to select 2 words, smashing them together to create a product. They then sell that product to the customer. On a very simple level, you are just putting 2 words together and then imagining what kind of product would have that name. But there's a real opportunity to flex your creative muscle. You have to come up with a marketing pitch that not only seems to justify the name you've selected for the product, but also which makes it sound appealing enough for the customer to buy it. And each customer has a different personality. They might be a cave person or a student or even Santa Claus. You have to consider that in your pitch. What does that particular customer want? As with Avalon, this game has slid down the chart over the years, and the last time I played it, it didn't land too well with the group. I picked up Deadpool vs. the World thinking it might be a decent alternative, but we quickly tired of it after the second play. So for now, Snake Oil takes 49th place. Number 48, Dracula. This is a bit of a weird choice really. Dracula is from Cosmos' old line of 2-player games. It's a head-to-head battle between Dracula and Van Helsing. The characters move around a grid board, revealing cards they land on and placing cards of their own. Dracula is looking for victims, while Van Helsing is looking for coffins to destroy. The idea is to keep moving your target cards around so your opponent cannot find them, while dropping booby traps like minions and crucifixes for them to find instead. There's combat, deduction, bluffing, and it's beautifully presented with evocative artwork and the board with a really pleasing design. It's not the best game in the world, I doubt anybody bar me would put it in a top 50 list, but it's in my list because it was one of the first board games I bought when I got back into board gaming. I was specifically looking for games to play with my then girlfriend, now wife, after we moved into our first home together. We played Dracula a lot in those early days, so the game holds a lot of fond memories for me, and of course, it was a stepping stone to where I am today with board gaming. Number 47, Welcome to the Dungeon. Welcome to the Dungeon is the lightest of filler games. It's a push-your-luck game where you and the other player secretly draw from a deck of monsters and then add them to a face-down pile to create a dungeon for an unwitting hero to explore. If you decide you don't want to place a monster into the dungeon, you can instead leave it out, keeping the monster secret so the other players don't know what you've done. But you have to take away one of the hero's useful items at the same time, which means the hero is more likely to die. At any time, instead of drawing, you can pass and sit out the rest of the round. Eventually, there will be only one player left in the round. They take control of the hero and send them into the dungeon. You now reveal the cards from the dungeon deck one by one, and the hero tries to defeat each monster with the useful items in their possession. Failure to defeat a monster causes wounds on the hero. If the hero gets all the way through the dungeon, the controlling player scores a victory point. If the hero dies, the controlling player loses a life. And that's it. Very light, very silly, and plays in a couple of minutes, making it a good one to play at the end of a long gaming session or while you are waiting for someone to show up. There are only 4 heroes in the game, so replayability isn't great, but there is a standalone expansion called Welcome Back to the Dungeon with 4 more heroes. This one makes my list mainly because I don't have many games that play this quickly. I do have Love Letter, 3 versions of it in fact, but I think Welcome to the Dungeon is just a little bit better and gets bonus marks for the awesome comical artwork. Number 46, Burrows and Badgers. Finally we get to something that seems more on brand for my channel, Burrows and Badgers. This is a really fun tabletop skirmish game. It has light, simple rules, a fun campaign system if you want to string games together, and best of all, a delightful whimsical theme with anthropomorphic animals. There's an official line of metal miniatures from Oathsworn Miniatures, but it's miniatures agnostic so you can use any miniatures you like, and it's just lovely. There's no starter set, just a book with beautiful artwork by Gary Chalk, who was the illustrator responsible for a lot of classic game art for things like Talisman and HeroQuest. One of the nicest things about this game is just to see it all set up with your painted animal miniatures and terrain, but the rules are solid too. There's a really clever combat system where creatures of different sizes use different polyhedral dice, and while the dice with fewer sides are likely to do less damage, they have an increased chance of landing critical hits. That's a fantastic way to represent how large animals are powerful and slower, while the small animals are weaker but use speed to their advantage to create David and Goliath outcomes just when you least expect it. Number 45, Hive. Hive is another one of those games that I bought when I was first getting back into board games. I played it to death with my wife, and I think it's an incredibly simple, clever design. Each player has a set of insect pieces, and you can tell how long I have had this game because I have an original edition with stickers on blocks rather than the fancy Bakelite version that exists now. There's no board, instead the players take turns to place insects, creating the board as they play. Each type of insect has a special rule associated with it, so grasshoppers jump, ants scurry around the edge of the existing playing pieces, and so on. If you completely surround your opponent's queen bee piece, then you win. It's a cute theme, plays quickly, has lots of strategy in it, and it's so compact you can take it with you wherever you go. Number 44, Advanced Space Crusade. Our first Games Workshop title makes an appearance at 44. Advanced Space Crusade is nothing at all like Space Crusade. I mean, on the surface there are similarities as teams of Marines enter an alien spaceship to complete different missions, but Advanced Space Crusade lives up to its name, and it's ideally just for 2 players, one controlling the Marine forces and the other controlling the Tyranids. There are lots of different types of Marines and lots of different types of enemies available, most of which aren't in the box. You have to buy all of that stuff separately. And the rules are far more in-depth and granular than they are in Space Crusade. There are complete systems for tactical skirmishes as your Marines plod through a Tyranid Hive ship, basically a living creature floating in space, in search of vital organs to destroy. And this game doesn't create small battles with just a few Marines. It scales up the conflict so you can have many squads of Marines and heroes moving through the ship, all of which you track on the strategic display, commanding your troops from afar as you send them on recon missions, call them back to reinforce your weak flank, or make a final push for an objective. Meanwhile, your opponent is controlling the swarms of Tyranids on a separate strategic display, planning ambushes and gathering an army to ruin your plans. And as you explore the ship, you flip exploration tokens, which might lead to little battles, a dramatic clash for an objective, or a little side event like finding some prisoners. There's so much to explore, and the confrontation feels suitably epic. It's detailed and intense. It's also long out of print. I was lucky enough to get a fantastic complete copy on eBay, and I am now gradually picking up vintage Oldhammer miniatures for all of the enemy and marine types listed in the rules. And that process of gradually building the collection plays into my enjoyment of the game as a whole. It's a really good game, but it's a wonderful hobby. Number 43, Tajemnicze Domostvo, or Mysterium. I've spoken about this game numerous times on the channel, so I doubt any long-time viewers are surprised it made the list. One player is a ghost, the other players are psychic investigators. The ghost has a selection of cards representing where they were murdered, who murdered them, and what the murder weapon was, and the psychic investigators have a tableau of cards that they need to select the right options from. The only clue they have is each round the ghost presents them with a card with an abstract image on it. The investigators have to analyse the cards to see if they can pick out clues to help them make the right selections. For example, if the ghost wants to direct an investigator to a card depicting a games room with a chessboard on it, they might give them a picture that has a knight in it. Watching people struggle to understand these cryptic clues is a huge amount of fun. I would say it probably works better with a group of people you know really well, as they are more likely to be able to decipher your clues based on how well they know your mind. But it's fun with anyone. It's my favourite party game, although it is a bit more fiddly to set up compared to things like Snake Oil. Number 42, Small World. I don't really play a lot of dudes on a map games. I don't have anything against them, I just tend to gravitate more to other things. Small World is one of the exceptions. It's a wonderful game from Days of Wonder with beautiful components and artwork. The game revolves around many randomly generated civilizations, comprising a race and the characteristics smashed together, so you might get diplomatic skeletons or dragon master Amazons. Every player has a starting civilization and they expand across the board, but at a certain point the civilization stretches too thin and it becomes difficult to expand further. At that point, you need to send them into decline. When you do this, you get to take a whole new civilization and start expanding them instead. Winning requires you to make the right decisions at the right times, knowing when to go for one more round with your current civilization and understanding when it's time to go into decline. And I am terrible at this game. I've never won it, ever. But it's always a good time. The funny civilization combos that are randomly generated, and the fact you can never guarantee which civilizations you will end up with, mean every game is different and you will constantly have to use different strategies to succeed. This game has been in my collection for years and has truly stood the test of time. And at 41, we have a modern classic. It's Pandemic. I love co-op games, and this is just a classic example with a theme everybody can connect with and understand, even though my wife says the box art makes the game look like one of those asylum mockbusters. It's beautifully presented, has simple clear rules, and it can be a real challenge. It spawned 100 imitators and spin-offs, and designer Matt Leacock has played with the formula in countless other titles like Forbidden Island, Forbidden Desert, Forbidden Sky, and Thunderbirds. But for me, Pandemic remains Matt Leacock's best effort and a fantastic choice for families and casual groups. I doubt there's anything more I can say about the game that you don't already know, so we'll leave it there. Number 41, Pandemic. And that rounds up this first video in my top 50 countdown. I hope you'll join me for the next instalment. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, please consider pressing the like button. If you've really enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so. and hopefully I'll see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone. Bye bye.